my content pre the end of 2015 is horrendous. It's awful, okay? That channel started in 2009. That's 6 years of trash before I got there. Started to be a bit more outgoing, started to kind of find my feet of who I was as I was growing up, and my content and my channel really evolved in the exact same moment. And that's when things really began to be more meaningful for me in terms of the money I was earning and properly focusing on doing it full time as a business. You can never be the hardest worker. And that's something you just have to come to terms with, is there is always someone out there working when you're sleeping. It's just the reality of the internet. But the second thing is that I do think that there has been historically in this space a certain kind of hustle that if you aren't willing to really treat it as a serious enterprise, it does make it a lot harder for you to succeed. You don't have to post every day. You don't have to stream every single day. Like, taking time for yourself in many ways, often I think, is actually the highest value add you can give to your stream or to your content. Because if you're in a better place, that's the biggest multiplier you could ask for on anything you do in life ever.
Milo, welcome to the show, MrRoflWaffles. I've been talking about having you on for a while. We finally did it. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to dive into the weeds with you today and talk about stuff.
The one thing I straight away is your accent. You know, you're obviously not from America. Whereabouts in the world are you from?
Yeah, I'm from London, born and raised. I get a lot of people that sort of unsure, because I think a lot of Americans don't necessarily know how to place like English accents, or just anyone from the UK really. They think I'm from Australia half the time. So, and I'm sure you get the same thing. Yeah. So,
well, I would say my wife doesn't think I sound anywhere.
Well, I hope
Scottish
now she'd know where you're from. But...
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I London born and raised, went to university in Bristol, just to give you, I guess, the quick bio. Went to uni in Bristol, studied physics, came home back to London, and that's where I am right now. Yeah.
Physics, was that something that was inspired by someone else, or was it you were nerding out about physics?
I'm a nerd. I was a nerd. I was good at it, and I was sort of equally good at everything in school, which was a bit of a problem. I mean, it was a good problem to have, because I was good at school. I was academic. That's just who I was. And I was good at physics, but also just enjoyed the difficulty of it. I enjoyed getting down in the weeds again, and just sort of struggling. So picked that, and it was a weird one, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but like I was doing YouTube. I've been doing YouTube since I was 13 years old or something. It's been like, I think my channel's, I mean, this channel is nearly 13 years old now. And I had a channel before that as well. And I picked possibly the worst subject I could have possibly picked for also making content, because physics has so many contact hours. Like, I had like 25 hours of contact a week at uni, and I was in the lab, and I was trying to do the degree, and at the same time, there I was like making YouTube videos. So it was a hustle. It was a real hustle, but I got through it, and here I am today. Yeah.
So we fast forward a little bit there, because there's at 13 years old.
Yeah.
You are making YouTube content. Why the hell did you start making YouTube content?
Honestly, I actually don't know, which is weird. I just did it. I don't have a founding memory where I was like, this is what I want to be when I grow up. It was never like that for me. It was, I actually have a distinct memory of a friend of mine getting an Oppage HD PVR Hoppage, which is actually, you know what? We're going to do some show and tell real quick. Just really, really quickly. Rapid show and tell.
I am so curious what this is.
I have the original box. That's why I'm getting it out. This is a Hoppage HD PVR. Many content creators these days may not know what the hell I'm talking about right now, but this thing was how you recorded. No, like, other new capture cards. And so you had these connections on the back, and it was a weird thing. But this was the only thing you could use. This was the only thing you could use to record in HD. There was nothing else. You had Dazzles, which were SD. They were 480p, like limited to 480p. This was your HD option, and it's just basically a TV DVR. Like, that's what you normally use it for. But a friend of mine got one of these, and I was like, that's the coolest thing in the world. So I saved up for like a year, and then got one of these, and then realized, oh man, this sucks. It doesn't actually work with the TV that I've got, because my TV didn't have these. So I plugged it in, and it was in black and white, and like Modern Warfare 2 was like inverted on my screen. I was like, this isn't going to work. So saved up more, finally got a monitor, and that was the Genesis event back in the day, but it was just for fun.
God, you must be so bad. Am I saving up for a year? You're like, because as a kid, like that's like a big goal, and then you're crushed.
This was like 160 quid, so like it's like $200, right? Yeah. And I like had like a little side job that I was earning money from, but I was earning like £10 a week, so it was not the most profitable venture. Let's put it that way.
So you inspired by your buddy, you got this. It didn't work. Were you starting to cut up videos at that point?
Yeah, so I started making content. I didn't have a computer. I grew up without a huge amount of money in my family, so like I was like borrowing my dad's computer, his laptop, and using like iMovie, the default like presets that they've got in there for stuff. And then I remember, like, I think at one point I borrowed a laptop from school and I was trying to do like C4D intros on it. So C4D, I don't know if you know, it's like a 3D modeling program, and I was making intros for like clans. So people would do a clan tage or whatever, and I would make an intro for it. They were not very good. Like, I was not very good at it. But it was in that time of my life, and maybe we'll talk more about this, where I was just figuring out what stuck. Like, I did not know where I was going. I didn't know what the content for me was. I was just trying to, I was figuring it out in prod, right? I was just doing it live and seeing what worked, basically.
And why did you keep up with that? Like, why didn't you just go, I tried this out, it clearly doesn't work, and no one cares. Why did you not just give up?
I mean, for me, I think that I was questionably obsessed with it, is one answer. I just decided that this was my thing. And at the time, there were not a lot of people that were making YouTube videos, and certainly not a lot of people that were making them as their full-time job. And so I was passionate about the act of doing it. I felt like I'd found a niche where I could excel and sort of do things on my own terms, and I really liked that. And it was really a really just unique opportunity for me, I think, even though it was still a hobby. I mean, I did it for something like 3 years unpaid completely. There was not a single dollar involved because I wasn't partnered, right? You had to be partnered at the time. So it was very much just pure passion project type stuff. But then also, I wasn't really allowed a lot of different types of video games when I was younger. My parents just were like, if it's got guns in it, nah, it's not happening. But over time, that kind of relaxed a little bit. And it got to the point where a friend of mine introduced me to Call of Duty Zombies, which has been my channel focus for the last 10 years or something. And I went to his house and played it, shout out Raph, and I was hooked. I was just like, I was blown away by this game. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And finding a game that I loved, combined with the fact that I was already making content, meant that I could mesh those two things together. And I mean, from there, it was just, I was in love with making content, and I was in love with the zombies, and I found the story really interesting, and it all plugged in a really good way, I think.
I think that there's something really important there, which you said, right, is you fell in love with the process, because a lot of content creators today, it seems like they're trying to find that game, like that thing that they love, and like they go all in on that, and they make content around that.
Yep.
You got 3 years of practice before you have found the thing that you got lit up about, like, you know, the game.
And I still sucked at that point. And that is something that I think a lot of people don't understand. My content pre the end of 2015 is horrendous. It's awful, okay? That channel started in 2009. That's 6 years of trash before I got there. And I was making money once I got partnered. I think I got my Machinima partnership in maybe on this channel, I think it was 2011, maybe early 2012, but I'm pretty sure it was 2011. And so I was earning money, but it was nothing. I was earning maybe, like, if I was really lucky, like $100 in a month, right? And at the time I was a student, so I was like, this is amazing. Like, oh, I've got money. This is crazy, right? But it was nowhere near actual livable income. And it was only once I kind of came out of my shell as a person that my content also came out of its shell, weirdly. There was a real sort of, it was a concurrent event, right? Where basically I started to be a bit more outgoing, started to kind of find my feet of who I was as I was growing up, and my content and my channel really evolved in the exact same moment. And that's when things really began to be more meaningful for me in terms of the money I was earning and properly focusing on doing it full time as a business when I went to university, my first year of university, so 2015-16, that year.
That gave me a little bit of chills. And the reason it did is because we've had a scholarship program we've ran for the last few cohorts at Pipeline.
Yep.
And it's a 12-week program where we will bring someone in, we do 12 weeks with them. There's a specific tipping point that happens that is very noticeable when their confidence shifts within that 12-week program. And it's just when you said that, I was like, yeah, exactly. It might have taken you, 5-6 years, but there was a confidence shift that happened for you. You became more, you knew who you were, and you became a little more outward.
Yep.
And that had a meaningful impact on your content. Yeah,
and it's something that I think took me longer to get there than it needs to. And I mean, I guess disclosure, yes, I'm an investor in Pipeline. I feel like that's relevant to mention.
Yes.
But part of the reason that I am so excited by Pipeline is that it's an opportunity to basically take all the grief that I know that I had, because I had a lot of grief in those 6 years, and to just give people a leg up so they don't need to spend all that time in the trenches sort of figuring it out. Because I was just not good at it, but no one was good at it back then. And so me figuring it out was a really crucial process and part of my growth as a creator. And my ongoing growth has been informed by it ever since. But I mean, in many ways it sucked, right? Because I just went through years and years and years of my life without really knowing if it was ever going to take off, without really feeling like my channel was going anywhere. I ended up with a lot of dead subs, and it was like, okay, well, like, I've done this. I've got a huge volume of stuff that I've made, but at what cost and to what ends? And it was a bit of a question mark until things actually clicked, and I was like, wait, hold on, like, this is how I do it, and this is the exact niche that I feel really well. And it was, I mean, I sort of grew my wings and flew from there, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a great perspective to have, having been through it and the time that you take. When you were in that for 6 years, what was it like for the people around you? You mentioned that you're obsessive, like you had to do this. What was it like for friends or family around you?
Yeah, something I have come to learn over the years in a really big way is that I think many top creators who grew from the same kind of like class as me, right? Like call it the class of 2009 when I started my channel. People in the same shoes who found success maybe in 2012, 13, 14, 15. I think one of the earlier waves of YouTube, certainly in it becoming a full-time thing. We all have had issues with figuring out how on earth you balance this Goliath of a machine that you need to feed at all times, right? Like, it never stops. There's always more content you can put out. It's always hungry. How you sate the beast while also maintaining your friendships and your relationship with your family and your own personal health and your mental health and just all of those factors that are so crucial, but that in the short term are very easy to put on the back burner while you're focusing on this crazy thing that you're trying to build and grow. And I've had moments in my life, specific moments, where I've been able to step back and reflect on this and have realized that it has come at a real cost a lot of the time. The amount of time that I've put in, the lack of switching off, all of that stuff is a burden on you in many ways. And you have to find ways to juggle the two. I mean, I remember really distinctly seeing a tweet from Hex, and Hex basically was saying, in esports, you can take your weekends off, right? You can do that, but there will be someone working the weekends. There will be someone that's doing that, and they're still finding a way to make it work with their family and to hang out with their kids and to do those things. Someone out there is putting that work in, and so you can choose to take the time off if you need that, and you should if you need that, but just be aware there's always someone else working like harder than you, right? And I think what's interesting about that is that it's sobering in two separate ways. One is that you can never be the hardest worker. And that's something you just have to come to terms with, is there is always someone out there working when you're sleeping. It's just the reality of the internet. But the second thing is that I do think that there has been historically in this space a certain kind of hustle that if you aren't willing to really treat it as a serious enterprise, it does make it a lot harder for you to succeed, because it's a fire under your ass that other people might have, and if you don't have it or you don't find a way to find it, it's gonna mean that you're gonna potentially fall by the wayside in certain areas. There's a real kind of like hustle culture, which isn't necessarily always a good thing, but it's there, and you need to be kind of cognizant of it, I think.
It sounds like there's a conscious choice that happens or does happen, and I've seen it kind of play out, is this idea of, is this a hobby or is this a career?
Yeah.
Did you go through a similar experience early on? Was there a choice that I want to make this a career?
The thing is, it's I think different for me compared to most people nowadays because of the timing of it. But I think I had my so I did a gap year, finished my like high school essentially here in the UK, and then took a year out before I went to university. I initially went off to work in a dark energy research lab, sort of getting some experience before going to do the degree. Then came home and was like, okay, I have, let's call it 9 months of time now. I'm just going to do YouTube full time and just see what happens. I'm just going to treat this as my chance. But the thing that's odd is that I was still just a kid. Like, I still thought that I'm just going to go to university, I'm going to do physics, and then I'll probably end up in research or something. So for me, there wasn't really I have to make this work in X time or I call it quits. But nowadays, I think that having some aspect of that mindset is really important, because you need, I think, to recognize that the most sought after career path now for kids in school is to become a YouTuber, become a content creator. It just is the way the world is. And amongst this massive group of people all trying to do the same thing, there will be people who necessarily will not end up doing it, right? They will not make it. And if you can identify that in yourself, if you can say, I've put in the requisite amount of time such that this should have worked by now and it hasn't, so I should do something else, that in itself is a really positive trait. Like, being able to call it quits at the right time, sunk cost fallacy, all that sort of stuff. So that's something that I've had friends ask me about in the past. They've said, hey, Milo, I've been doing this channel for like 18 months and it's still not working out, or it's been 2 years, or it's been 3 years. And I'm like, okay, you either need to radically change up what you're doing, like clearly what you're doing is not working, and just beating the dead horse is not going to help you, or you need to actually make the decision to pivot and try and do something else. Maybe you're super passionate about content, but there's an entire world of managers out there and producers, and I mean, it could also be going into, for myself, I guess a tangential career path would be something in gaming, whether it's community management, or there's so many different roles that are like you're being a content creator, but it's in a different sort of set of shoes, if you will. And I think being able to identify that is really key now. Whereas for me, I didn't have to, but that was more because I was earlier, I think, in the coming up of the space. Sorry, I'm giving you a lot of long answers. I talk a lot. Sorry.
No, that is absolutely what we want. Your point around the kind of forks, like in the pursuit of becoming a content creator, you will realize these different opportunities. And we've seen this. There's thousands of creators that have been through Pipeline, and we're seeing creators that just fall in love with the editing process, but hate all the business legal stuff on the back end, or fall in love with social media or things like that. And I think that is when you think about content creation, even if the existing goal today is to become a content creator, there is the opportunity that it will fork off into different paths that you can't even foresee right now, but is effectively like your experience going to university. You could have maybe went in for physics, but ended up going down a different path.
Yep, absolutely. And a perfect example of that is one of my best friends, JC Backfire, was another zombies content creator like myself. And he was always very passionate about building a community. Like, his channel was all about community. That was his thing. And then he was like, okay, well, I'm going to move away from YouTube and I'm going to do Twitch for a while. And he did that for a while, and it's like gone really well for him and stuff. But he's ended up pivoting to being a community manager at like a new studio that's formed recently. And so he's now doing the stuff that he loved before, building that community, but just that's his official role at the studio. And it doesn't mean that he's given up on content. Like, he'll still stream and he'll still do those things, but he's essentially picked out where his talents are strongest and gone, okay, let's dive in deep there, and then the sort of peripheral stuff can still be a thing as a hobby, but I don't need to purely be reliant on this as my full-time gig. And I think that's exactly what we're talking about, right? It's just being able to recognize that there are more opportunities in this space than only becoming a streamer or becoming a YouTuber or whatever you've sort of picked as your current focus. For many, it's perfect for you and it will work out really well, but for some, you can find maybe better fitting opportunities elsewhere, potentially. Yeah.
One of the things we talked about, Milo, in the past, I think you've got a really healthy perspective on, and I think it's because you've been around for so long, you've experienced a lot in the space, is burnout. And inevitably, when you're on this grind in the beginning, you're working the 9-to-5 job, maybe you're at school, and you might have a kid, you might have a significant other, whatever it is, you're going to be crunching, and there is burnout. It's a real thing. What has your experience been with burnout over the last 13 years?
What a question. So I think I have a quite intimate relationship with burnout as a phenomenon. It has plagued me over the years in a big way, and it's still something even now that I grapple with, and I think all creators grapple with from time to time. I think it's just it's part of the job, right? Part of the job description almost is being able to navigate it. So maybe to rewind a little bit. So as I was saying, I jumped into content creation in school, finished my high school, went to university. Through that entire time, had been making content. And then at university, I had this physics degree, really, really time consuming, worked super hard on it. I didn't flunk the degree because of YouTube by any means, even though in the first year of my degree, I believe I was part of a Google program here in the UK. They had a program at the YouTube space, and I think that I was involved in that because I was something like one of the top 100 fastest growing channels that year in the UK. I was blowing up in a really big way, and it was very exciting. But as you can imagine, alongside the degree means I was having to work really hard. And then the following year, second year at my university, is notorious for just students hate it. A lot of people drop out because it's so hard. And then it was my final year and I had my project, and I was doing things like I went to Comic-Con to do an interview with a game developer and basically cover the event for content. And I flew myself out to San Diego. This wasn't on a company's dime. Spent a day getting the interview and spent the following 6 days or something in my Airbnb writing my final project. I was just coding the entire time, and it was silly. I was burning the candle at every end it had. And so then I went full time after the degree, and I noticed something really weird, which was that all of that time that I'd spent grinding on my physics stuff and on my school stuff had actually been giving my brain a break from YouTube. And it was like I'd been able to kind of take solace in this other kind of really difficult work that was not a creative field, right? It was very analytical, very academic. And so when I lost that and I was purely full-time on content, I started to go a bit crazy. I just started to lose it because all of my time suddenly could be spent making content, and there's always more content you can make. So that went on for about a year. And then I had a bunch of things happen in my personal life. I went through a really difficult breakup. I had a family member pass away, and there were several factors that all came together. And it kind of clicked that I actually hated what I was doing at that moment. I could not. I would sit down at my desk and I would feel just almost a sense of dread, like I was going to fall through my chair and just exit the universe. It was just this horrible feeling that things were wrong. And so I cold turkey stepped away. I made a video basically saying, I'm really sorry, guys. I need to piece the scene. And part of the reason I need to do this is that over those previous 10 years or whatever it was of making content, I realized I'd actually never taken time off, ever. And that sounds hyperbolic, but what I mean by it is that there had never been a moment where I wasn't checking my phone for news that might have been coming out that I would need to make a video on. There'd never been a point where I was relaxing on my own time and not thinking about content or thinking about exams that I had coming up. Like, I had never actually stepped away. And as many creators I'm sure will be able to relate to, weekends were a myth. They didn't exist. I was working on my weekends. I would be talking with a brand. They'd be like going away for the weekend, and I'd still be there working away on the content that I was making for them or whatever. It just never ended. And I needed to break that cycle desperately, or I was just gonna lose it. I was just gonna go actually crazy. So stepped away, and I basically went to the mountains, and I lived in the mountains for months, just figuring out what the hell was going on with me and in my head, and whether I wanted to make content anymore. And by some miraculous twist of fate, I came back to more views than I left with. Like, I came back 9 months after leaving, and I was then getting more views per video than I had been originally. And that, I think, is... It says something about the space that is a truth that a lot of creators haven't actually tapped into yet, which is that you don't have to post every day. You don't have to stream every single day. Like, taking time for yourself in many ways, often, I think, is actually the highest value add you can give to your stream or to your content. Because if you're in a better place, that's the biggest multiplier you could ask for on anything you do in life ever. And a lot of folks forget that, and they just focus on, well, I need to make this video better. I need to grind harder on this thumbnail. I need to make sure that my stream production's like higher quality. But at the end of the day, if you're a burnt out mess, then that stream, like all the fancy lights and stuff, they don't matter anymore. What matters is that you're like falling asleep in your chair trying to hold a live stream together. So I had that realization, took the time away, and just tried to come back with a new perspective and tried to make sure that I never forgot that ever again. And it has informed the way I think about content ever since, for the last sort of, I guess, year. It's been a year since I've come back. Yeah.
That is an incredible perspective to have for someone who's been through the journey that you've been through. And I mean, no one could feel like, no content creator could go, I could take 9 months off and then come back and I could still have a life, a business, a channel. And I think that perspective is really, really interesting. Some might say, well, Milo, you know, you made it. You've got millions of subscribers. I'm in the early days. I can't afford to do that.
Yeah.
What's your perspective?
For me, I think that if you can't afford to take the time you need to maintain a baseline, healthy relationship with yourself, then you need to do something differently, right? You cannot, and I really believe this, you can sacrifice a night of sleep, or you can sacrifice a couple hours a week, or you can sacrifice things, right, in the day-to-day, in the short term, in order to get the grind done to the level that you need to, right? And we all make those sacrifices. What you cannot do is you cannot give up your entire self-worth and self-image and relationship with everything around you purely for the sake of, well, then I'll have more hours in order to grind the content. I think that it's a real misconception that if you stop doing, like, maybe you've got something in your life, like, I don't know, maybe you have like a little side hustle, like you babysit for a friend of yours that has a kid down the road or something, or maybe you dog walk, or maybe you've just got like something going on, right, that's different, and maybe it doesn't earn a lot of money, but you've just been doing it. Sacrificing things like that may seem like they're just an easy way to just get a load more hours to focus on content, but they come with a hidden cost, which is that, like I said with the physics thing, I was switching my brain off there to do that other thing and using a different part of my brain in order to do it. And if you eliminate all those things in your life, eventually you're going to hit a wall where you just are not actually adding value by adding hours. Like, there is a real problem of diminishing returns that I think a lot of people miss out on. And so if you're in a position where, like, let's say you're working super hard, you're working like, I don't know, like crazy hours, you're working 8 till 8 every single day, right? And you get home and you're exhausted, but you're trying to find that energy to jump on a stream and to be energetic and to be entertaining and things like that, which a lot of people are trying to do. You need to just remember that you can do that on a day and grind through it, and you'll be exhausted at the end of the day, but you'll have done it and you'll be proud of yourself. but that is not a livable, maintainable schedule long term, and it should not be the schedule that you establish for yourself in order to just reach a baseline, right? Like I said, shoot for those moments when you are like, if there's a thing coming out, let's say there's a game coming out, right? And you know that there's going to be huge viewership for that release week. Maybe even you've got like a review code or something, you've got in contact with a publisher or whatever, and you have an opportunity, then like by all means, spend the time, grind, do the things, cancel the dog walking, like get it done. But just always try and have it in the back of your mind. I would advise to remember that your own health is ultimately the entire baseline on which everything else rests. And if you sacrifice it to such an extent that it starts to falter, everything else will falter on top of it. So you need to keep it in mind.
Yeah, there's a level of self-awareness that you have to have, and I think there's an honesty to that. Because I think we can often fool ourselves that things are okay, this is all worth it, this is great. But if you can't ask yourself that question and then answer it honestly, you're doing yourself a disservice.
Yep, and being able to talk about that with your peers is also very helpful. So if you have a network around you of whether it's other creators that are trying to find success in the same sort of area that you are, or it's just friends that maybe are supporting watching your videos or whatever, right? If there are people around you that you can talk to about this stuff that have some perspective of getting it, like rather than someone that doesn't know YouTube or Twitch or whatever, talk to them and just open up. Like don't worry that you're gonna sort of, I don't know, alienate yourself or something by talking about your problems. I really think that there's a lack of discussion with creators in a lot of areas with regard to talking about the struggles of the game, talking about burnout, talking about these challenges that we face, because people sort of go, oh, well, you're making money, so it's like, it doesn't matter that you're burnt out. And like they say all these things because at the end of the day, also, a lot of our viewers are young, they don't have a lot of life experience, they don't necessarily get it, right? They just don't get it. And so I would advise to just cast those concerns that you might have aside and just try and open up to people if you can and talk about it. I literally had a friend today, he reached out and said, hey, Milo, I'm actually feeling like I'm adrift. I don't know what I'm doing. The content I've been making, I'm just sort of not sure of. And we just chatted about it for a while and got to the end of the call and he was like, you know what? I still don't really know where I'm going, but this has helped so much. So thanks. And the more conversations you can have like that, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think there's a nervousness around that because you don't want to talk to your community about it because you don't want to come across as negative or down or like impact the content. But you're right, it's so important that you talk or find people, find your crew, find your clique that you talk with and you go on this journey together.
Yep. You've
seen so many things again over the years.
I've got that look in my eye, that glazed over eyes look like, man, I've seen some shit.
And the thing that we're touching on a little bit is this idea of obsessiveness, right?
Yeah.
And it's when you have it, it feels like a drug in a sense. It's like it kind of brings you alive. And a lot of content creators, if it's like they're playing a game because, say, people really want to watch Warzone, so that's like the game that they're streaming or making content around because that's where all the viewership is. So they're making it, but they don't love Warzone. When you don't have that sense of obsession, how do you motivate yourself and energize yourself to do the work that needs to be done? Yeah,
so this is such a good question, and I'm just going to chew your ear off answering it. So interrupt me if I ramble here, but this is something I think about a lot. Before I took my break, I sort of sat down with myself and I had to have a think about whether I actually enjoyed what I was doing anymore and whether that meant I should do something else. And I was burned out, so I was that was affecting my headspace. But I have been blessed over the years to love Call of Duty Zombies and specifically love the story of it. It's always been so cool to me. And so it's meant that in the times where I would be doing absurd amounts of work for research purposes or in creating content, it never felt really, or certainly the vast majority of the time, didn't feel like a burden. I just loved it. And I was already nerding out about these things. And so being able to pour that into my content was almost effortless. It was a really blessed position to be in. But you then get those moments where it's like, okay, this year we've got a different story going on, it's less interesting. Or this year, for example, the current one, it's the continuation of the story, but the story is just in a slightly less interesting place now compared to where it was for me in the past. So do I just grind through that? Or like, do I try and pivot to another game that's popping? Like a lot of people that have been playing Warzone recently, I've seen them moving over to Apex, right? And they're loving Apex right now, or seeming to. But are they loving it because that's where the views are? Or are they loving it because they actually like the game, right? And there's always that kind of question in the back of people's minds. And so over the years, when I've thought about this question and this topic, something that a lot of my creative friends have always echoed back to me is, if you start another channel or something, or if you pivot game and you chase views, you have to recognize the fact that you're going to hate what you're doing every single day. You're just not going to like it, because what you were doing previously, as in speaking to myself here, what you were doing previously was doing it because of the passion. You weren't doing it because you enjoyed growing the channel necessarily. You weren't doing it for like other external reasons. You were doing it because you were passionate about the game, and you would then be trying to replace that passion with something that doesn't, it's a puzzle piece that doesn't fit in the same hole. It's just another game with views. It's not another game with views that you love. So in that sense, I think that you have to be able, and this is going to sound like awkward advice to give maybe, but I think you have to be able to recognize that there are some types of content out there that even though they get views, you just will not enjoy making them, and so you shouldn't do it. But I also recognize that for people that are trying to make it and they're trying to grow a channel and they're trying to build, they don't necessarily have that luxury. But the question I would then ask is, again, there are thousands of people out there, there are millions of people out there actually, that do love Warzone, or they do love creating content for Apex or whatever game, or it doesn't have to be gaming, lifestyle, it could be travel, it could be food, it could be whatever. If they all love it, and they're grinding on it and they're passionate, and you don't, but you're trying to put the same amount of work in, you do recognize that that's going to be such there's going to be such a discrepancy there on how much work it feels like for you compared to them. And you're just going to hate it. Like, you're just going to grow to hate your job. And if you're trying to get out of the 9 to 5, you're trying to get out of the 8 to 8, like I said before, or whatever like position you're in, if you're doing that and then you're just going through the motions, doing something you don't even enjoy, I don't know if you're improving your situation by doing that, right? Like, I'm sure maybe you hate your boss and you want to get away from him, but it's no easier when you're your own boss, and your own boss yourself is telling you to do something you don't like. Like, that isn't a better scenario for a lot of people. So maybe it's counterintuitive, but the answer I would give, to go back to your question of like, what do you do when you need to grind through it and you don't enjoy it, is sometimes you just put your big boy pants on and you do it, right? But a lot of the time, if that is actually something that's firing in your head and you're like having those thoughts, it may be a sign that you're actually putting your efforts in the wrong place, and you should try and find something more suited to what you do enjoy. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're all here for, right? Like, if you're going to be your own boss, you're going to try and tell yourself to do something that you actually love, or what's the point? You might as well do something else, as far as I'm concerned.
13 years, Milo.
Yeah.
13 years.
I've seen some shit,
there's another chapter. There's another
Yeah.
chapter that's coming, and you're thinking about the next chapter.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about working a regular IT job, or in the physics lab? Have you ever thought about, in the 13 years, I wish I could go the other way, which is I just want to be a normal person and have a job?
To be honest, no. One of the things, for example, that I am so privileged to be able to experience in my life is here's an example. I am a real night owl, and in the mornings, and this is how I was through uni and just in general, I will wake up and I will be a slob and do nothing for about 3 hours because my brain doesn't turn on. It just doesn't. I'm a seal. I'm just lying there, just like, huh, wow, life's crazy, man. And it takes me a long time to get going, and then come like 10 p.m., I'm like, right, I'm in the matrix right now. I can see the numbers, I can see everything, and I excel in that environment. And so being my own boss and being able to do things on my own terms means that I can permit myself to do that, and basically any 9 to 5 on the planet does not have that luxury. So I recognize I'm very privileged in that way. With that said, though, I'm a bit of a workaholic. I do enjoy doing... I really enjoy being busy. I just really enjoy being busy. And I also really enjoy being good at things. And so if I fill my time with things that I'm good at, then I'm happy. And so I have thought about, okay, well, what if I went back to university and got my master's just alongside YouTube? Like, I could do that. I could do it healthily, I think. And it would be a real struggle. Like, it would be a lot of work, but I think I'd love it. Like, I think I would love that challenge. And similarly, I think I could probably get a job in sort of some kind of, probably a part-time position somewhere, in whether it be in tech or in research or what have you, and just do it alongside YouTube. I don't think I would necessarily give up the content creation, but to have another thing like that is, it's something I thought about quite a lot, actually. Because I like putting my brain to work on stuff. I always have. And so, it's not out of the question for me. And the cool thing is that there are other ventures that I may or may not start, or may not be already in the process of trying to figure out, which would maybe end up being that. Like, I think that for me, it's unlikely I would start like a second channel and just make more gaming videos sort of thing. I'm looking for something else, and so maybe I start some kind of research related thing, but it is still on my own terms. It is still my own project or what have you. I think there's lots of possibilities out there, but the idea of going towards academia or towards a more traditional role in something is definitely not out of the question for me.
It would be interesting to go. Could you imagine your peers that were starting alongside you? Could you just imagine like their perspective on you're like studying at university and they're like just coming up and you're already like doing YouTube, and that'd be fascinating.
it was a thing in uni where I would have friends that would be, and I don't say this to brag. I hope they don't mind me saying this, but like I had 1 or 2 people I spoke to, and they felt kind of inadequate because I already had like basically my career on my plate, right? My channel had blown up, and it was like, well, that's your life. You figured it out. Congrats. Whereas they were like finding themselves at uni doing the exact same subject as me in the exact same shoes, but I'd already achieved what they perceived to be so much. And that was hard for them to kind of grapple with. And we would talk about it, and I'd be like, well, I'm just the same as you. Like, I'm sure there's stuff that you've learned over your life, or that you've done over your life. Maybe you play the piano to a really high level or something. I certainly can't do that. So it's really a matter of perspective in that way. But one example, and like, I'm going to go off the deep end here, okay? I want to tell you something that I had an idea the other day, and I was like, I think this is cool, but maybe I'm crazy, right? So
let's hear it.
We're really going off the diving board with this one. At uni, my final year project was modeling hydrodynamic synchronization of micro machines. And what that means is you basically would have a load of rotors, little beads in a fluid, and you'd start them all off oscillating next to each other. So just imagine a grid of beads moving in a circle. Each one's moving in a circle, okay?
Yep.
And you start them off out of sync. You just start them randomly moving in a circle. But through hydrodynamic synchronization, through interactions of forces within the fluid that they were immersed in, they would all over time synchronize, pending the right conditions, so that their oscillations would all be synced up. Okay? And so they would start random and chaotic, and then they would all end up doing this beautiful synchronized pattern. It's the same kind of synchronization that you see when you see old videos of like soldiers walking over bridges, and the bridge starts to go like this because it's synchronizing with the frequency of the footsteps of the soldiers, right? There's just this phenomenon happening there. And so I made this project in uni and was researching this area, and there's now a really big generative art movement that is coming up on the back, I think, really, of a lot of excitement over NFTs and things in crypto. And so what I've been thinking is, holy smokes, my final year project, if I spent like 6 months to a year fleshing this out and getting animations of all of this stuff and turning it into an actual generative series of art pieces, it could fit in so well with this whole new world of stuff. So in that way, it's like, okay, this has no relation. I mean, I'm a zombies YouTuber, right? No one cares about hydrodynamic synchronization and no one cares about generative art, but I like both of those things. So maybe it's like stuff like that just excites me, man. I'm just trying to challenge myself.
I love it. I think that is why I can't wait to see what you do with that. The NFT world and the generative art world is something I'm like very, very surface, can see it happening periphery, but I know there's a lot of depth to that. I think the one thing that stood out to me throughout this entire podcast is the process. Like you've really been a student of the process and learning, and whatever area it is that you go into, you almost have to master it. It's not like you want to master it. It's like you almost have to master each area.
Yeah. I think I don't really give up on stuff until I'm good, what I perceive to be good at it, I think. So yeah, I think there's definitely an addiction to learning. Is that it? It's something like that.
It sounds like, I mean, you're talking about going to maybe get your master's, or you're talking about like going deep into the crypto world, or when we started this podcast, you were playing guitar because you learned the guitar as well. I cannot play music. I think, Milo, your perspective, I think, is really valuable for many of the listeners. Really diving into the journey and the burnout and the mental lessons and the psychology that you've learned over the last decade.
Yep.
I really encourage our listeners to take that to heart and think about what that means for them now. Don't wait 10 years to ask themselves the questions that you're asking. You've got the benefit of hindsight.
You do. Yeah. I am like, and the bags under my eyes are proof that if you wait that long, it will catch up with you and it will suck. So yeah, use my lesson as a warning, if you will, or my story as a warning, if you like, or just maybe something to be cognizant of as you work your way through this crazy world that is the internet, really.
It is. Milo, thank you so much. I cannot wait to share this with the rest of the community. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.